Yo, what's crack-a-lackin' everyone? Crash Control back again, coming at you guys with MonsterArts Biollante. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and leave a like on the video. And also, leave a comment down below on your favorite monster movie, whether it's kaiju related or horror. My favorite giant monster movie or kaiju movie is Godzilla vs. Destroyer, and my favorite horror movie is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But anyways, guys, let's get started. Now, starting off with her background, Biollante actually comes from the movie Godzilla vs. Biollante. She was genetically engineered in the lab by Dr. Genshiro Shiragami by splicing cells or the DNA of his daughter, Erika Shiragami, a rose, and the cells of the king of the monsters, Godzilla. And later on through the movie, we find out that that was not the best idea to do. Mainly because you just created a massive 200,000 ton Godzilla plant-like monster who vomits acid for fun. Now, a few fun facts about Biollante, first being that in her final form, it took a crew of 20 people to manipulate Biollante's body, mainly being the massive carnivorous vines that she has. And another person inside the suit named Takagami Akio, which I probably butchered the name. Then my favorite fun fact, she appeared in a 1992 manga called The Godzilla Comic Raids Again, where the Exilians actually unleash King Ghidorah to take over the Earth, but has actually stopped Biollante, who was living in space debris. Which is pretty crazy because you don't really think plant monsters live in space. After a while, King Ghidorah and Biollante actually meet up and begin to battle. Ghidorah uses gravity beams against Biollante, but she actually ends up absorbing the essence of its power and becomes a plant-like King Ghidorah. This Biollante is actually more closer to Godzilla, obviously because of the scientists splicing Godzilla cells. But in the manga, she actually gains a very interesting form. Essentially, she's still plant-based, but has more of a King Ghidorah look to her. And even though she did absorb King Ghidorah's power's essence, she is ultimately still defeated. In another manga, she appears as Neo Biollante, which in this form, she's actually pretty wild. The kaiju itself is actually called King Godzilla. It's an amalgamation of Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Batra, and Biollante herself. Essentially a chimera of kaijus. Those were just a few fun facts that I thought were pretty interesting about Biollante. If you want to go in deeper about Biollante or any other kaiju, I recommend the Kaiju Wiki. And now, let's kickstart the figure review. Starting off with her articulation, Biollante's body has many points of movement all around from her head down to the back of her body, being able to move left and right, up and down. Her mouth can open very wide to dish out some wide chomps. Also, if you want her to look up more properly and look more natural, she does come with this neck flap, I guess you could say, to hold her head up higher. This is so that when you pose her with her head high, her head doesn't fall down. Although on its own, it does hold up pretty well, it just won't look as natural. For the body, there's not much that you can do other than have her posing her up high, down low, mid, side to side almost. I would just be careful not posing her too far to the left or right, just because the risk of breaking apart inside, especially for the high price that she's worth. Now, down at the base of the figure, at first I actually didn't know that the base, where all the vines are connected, could actually move. It actually does make sense that it can move, because in the movie she's actually seen charging at Godzilla with all 4 of her tree trunks? Whatever you want to call this base, that's what she was moving. Sort of like this. It is a very limited range of motion, and it isn't really meant to do anything crazy, but it does its job of replicating the movement. Now, where she truly shines in her articulation is actually in her carnivorous vines. Most of her vines are pretty much exactly the same, with only minor different paint applications, some being more dirtier at the base with a brown, or some being more greener at the tip or at the base of it. But essentially, all the articulation for the vines are exactly the same. All of them being able to open the vine's mouth about to this much. Being able to close. And just like a vine, you're able to twist and turn in any kind of direction you want. My only complaint about the vines is that they do seem to come off pretty easily, but only if you twist them too tightly or you're too rough with them. They can come off pretty easily, especially at the base. Well, not quite at the base, but a little bit over the base around this area. With this kind of posability, you can actually have her fight multiple kaijus at once. One vine could be holding Kong wrapped around his body, while the main 2 are actually focused on Godzilla, and you have one of the back ones being focused on Mothra or maybe Rodan. There's just a lot of variety of poses that you can do with her vines. The only minor issue is that they do come off easily sometimes, but the good thing is they don't break when they do. It's really just a minor inconvenience or an annoyance when you're trying to take a photo or simply posing her. Now, the detail on her is actually really awesome. Starting from her head down all the way to the lower body and even all the way up to the tip of the vines. SH really didn't miss a spot. She has a very crocodilian-like head sculpture with tusks coming out of the side of her head, kind of reminding me of the movie Rampage, and specifically the monster Lizzie, which in all honesty, they probably took inspiration from Biollante. Now, the sculpt of her mouth, the inside of her mouth, mainly consists of small but very sharp teeth with minor fleshy details on the sides and the back of the mouth, as seen deep inside. And if I were you, unlike Godzilla, I would avoid trying to get inside her mouth. She is a biter. Now, the back of her is very reminiscent of Godzilla's dorsal plates. With Godzilla, he has his spiny bone protrusions, but with Biollante, she has thorns coming out of the side of her and plant-like protrusions and a similar form of that of Godzilla. Now, the front and as well as the back of her is actually very wide and nicely detailed, kind of replicating the trunk of a tree or really thick roots, while the spines on her back are like a bushy tree. The front of her, though, is what's really interesting. Just like the back, front part of her down here has the same kind of detail all throughout her body at the base. But the difference is she has this weird cord thing going around on her stomach. I don't know what exactly it is. It is a cool design that they added to the character. One of the unique features that Biollante has is her carnivorous vines. Her design isn't just simply 2 legs and 2 arms and a funky looking body, which, to be fair, she is a kaiju, so she does have some weirdness to her. She's unique in the way that her vines actually do most of the handiwork or legwork too. As seen in Godzilla vs. Biollante, she is able to charge at an opponent at a pretty decent speed for her size. And not only that, her vines are really great for biting, wrapping, slapping, and slamming down on an opponent. Especially if one of these little thorns gets stuck in you. Throughout most of her vines, they're really a copy and paste kind of a deal going on, where at the base of the vine, there's thorny protrusions coming out, and as it slowly goes upward, it starts to dissipate. Not only that, there are parts of the vine where little points stick out just to give it a bit more detail and more of a lively look. And at the tip of the vines, they have this very carnivorous feature, sort of a small head going on, where it does have some nice detail with these little bumpy like structures indicating where the tooth is at. And in the inside, just like in her actual mouth, there is fleshy bits. And what I didn't know what they were going to add is actually a tongue in each of the vines, which is really neat. And finally, the part where I say they did do bad, but it really doesn't matter, is actually the bottom of the figure, where you can see it's just green plastic. But what kind of makes up for this is a unique feature that it has. Down here, there is a switch to actually turn on a light that's inside of her, which illuminates her core in two colors, red and kind of an orangey yellow. Here's the first light up, and then the second light up. Now, this is a re-release and a special color variant of the original release of Biollante. This time around, Biollante has more of like a light green tip on her back and neck, and throughout her body she has slight patches of brown, blackish green, and very dark green areas all throughout. At the base, she has mainly a brown or tannish paint job, really to show that she's grinding on the dirt and moving around, especially at the base of her vines, showing that she's moving them and really kind of clawing her way through the land. Definitely a lot different than the original Biollante release back from November of 2013, where in that one she was basically swamp green or kind of like a forest green all throughout her body. While in this one, they add more color variation. Starting at the bottom, they kind of give her this kind of mud or dirty look to her. And as we go up, it starts to fade in to a darker green or a blackish green. And at the very tip, it ends off with a bright forest green. Going in closer, around her head, you can tell there are some darker spots of green, as well as the bases of the vines, and a couple brown and black patches of paint. An interesting part though about her core, paint wise, it's really not painted as much. It looks like they just used some sort of reflective orange plastic and just added some swirls and detail to the actual core. The inside of her mouth isn't all too special. The detail on it is good, but the paint portion isn't all too special, and it looks like they just used the same kind of paint all throughout the mouth except for the teeth. The majority of her teeth is actually just a white paint application, while the tusks do have the same thing. The only difference is that the tusks do have this like light dirty bone paint application. So while the paint on her teeth and tusk are good, I definitely wouldn't rate it the best in the SH MonsterArts line. I say Biollante is definitely a must-have figure for any kaiju or figure collector. And especially if you're a Godzilla fan, if you're willing to pay the price. With great articulation, with the only issue being the vines do fall off, but are pretty easy to put back on, amazing detail all throughout her body, and great paint transitions throughout her sculpture, from a dirty brown at the roots to a bright green at the tip of her body. But anyways guys, this has been Crash Control's SH MonsterArts Biollante review. Signing out.